Yeah, it's difficult to get that that systems thinking approach, so that farmers and anyone can extract themselves out of the hole of the whole world's against me, and
it's a real mental game.
It's a real mental game. Yeah, and I'm very fortunate that we're involved in a solution, a business that's centred on the solution. So you're in this space all the time of being in a part of the solution.
Yeah.
So whilst you might get sucked into what's happening down in Canberra or whatever else, it's not long that you're in there and you get a little bit angry, a little bit frustrated, or laugh at the bullshit that's going on, and then you because you're involved in something that's totally for the solution. Probably the only thing I get frustrated around is there's just a lack of people thinking about systems, thinking for the whole system, and particularly in the regen ag space. They're focused on the technical aspects of agriculture, but they're not thinking about the social justice and all of the other the opportunities that they have. That can really bring them a lot more joy in their lives, a lot more intellectual and cultural stimulation, which obviously enriches your life and unfolds all the faculties that we have. Because as a farmer, and me being an ex-farmer, we don't realise that the way we operate our farms, because we're dealing with the weather, we're dealing with ag consultants, we're dealing with banks, we're dealing with all of these very, very interconnected systems, we actually have a mental mindset that actually is that not other people have. Anyone in business has to have a sort of quite, you're thinking in a systems way already.
Yeah.
You just got to expand your thinking to look at the root causes and go, oh, okay, right.
Yeah, because a lot of agriculture has really focused on the symptoms, not the causes.
That's right, yeah.
And I think that's what's tended to narrow them down. And
that's right.
In the hospital system,
yeah,
pharmaceutical,
yep,
the agricultural,
yep,
teaching even.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So, and that's what we need to start, explode, not implode.
That's right, yeah. And you see that with like Charlie Massey and when they sit and we have these big yarns, their mind has broadened even more because we're sitting at the epicentre. This nexus between food coming in and customers who are wanting that food, and so which is where all the power has been wielded. All of the power of the supermarkets, the processors, the Simplots, all of those giants are sitting in that space of distribution because that's where all the power is.
Yeah.
And they can completely monopolise whatever the customers think or what they want them to think, and what the farmers should grow because they're in that. But that's changing. Yeah. So the power is now wow, hang on, like previously, back when I started Food Connect, there was enough food grown to feed 12 billion people. Wow. And people were concerned about not having enough. And that's the trick they were playing. They were telling farmers, telling the world that there's not enough food and we need to, ramp up the production.
Yeah.
But in reality, and that was the way they can monopolise farmers' pricing, because farmers thinking, oh, okay, if they don't buy off me, who are they going to buy off? And they were doing that. They would deliberately get a big farmer who's just bought a land to say, listen, can you grow, 3 years of zucchinis for us at B double a day, and push the price down and do all these sort of things. But when natural events started happening, like bananas, when cyclones, they started to happen more frequently, and our farmers were brought into that. They were ringing me saying, because they were selling to me because they couldn't afford to do the fresh care thing. We didn't care about the fresh care thing. We'd say, no, send it down, we're good. Coles and Woolies got all the farmers to spend a huge amount of money on basically making sure their sheds were all cemented and everything was off the farm. There was a certain standard of plant and equipment that washed the veggies or transported the veggies or put them in crates. So like costing farmers $25,000 to $30,000, and they had to get certified and spend the money. And so when one of the cyclones hit, two of our banana farmers said, hey Rob, I'm being offered $130 a box by Coles and Woolies, and they don't care about whether I've got fresh care or not. Do you mind if I sell? Because we had a flat price. So normally they would sell at maybe $18 back then, 12 to $18 a box. We were paying them something like around 28 to $32 a box. And here they are offered $120 a box, and I'm saying, okay, as long as we've got bananas, we can tell our customer base that we've still got bananas coming in, but limited amounts, and you go and make a bit of money while the hay shines, and then come back at it. So now we're seeing with all of these other events, and now the geopolitical shocks, and the cost of urea and all these other things, that the supermarkets are going, we'll just take it from where, you know. Yeah.
So I would like to introduce you. This is Robert Pekin of Food Connect in Brisbane. And I have been buying the Food Connect box for over 2 years now, I think, maybe almost 2.5. And what happened was I started buying organic boxes, but I wasn't happy with the quality of the food. So that's when I don't even know how I managed to know of you.
Yeah, right.
But Food Connect popped up, and it must have been an interview with somebody that you were on their channel of some description. Anyway, I asked Robert then, once I'd tested the box, I'd actually asked him if I could align Farming Revolution with Food Connect very loosely. When I say that, we're not signing a contract or anything, but that I would try, because I had the wrap, which was the Regenerator app. It doesn't exist anymore because it was just costing me too much money. But basically that was about educating consumers, tasting the product of regeneratively grown food, plus Scott Robinson in the sunny coast with his polyculture worm juice.
Oh yes, and
then the multi-species, I was going to provide multi-species for children to plant in the garden. So it was that holistic approach. That was why I affectionately called it the wrap, because it was the wrap, the Regenerator app. And Robert said, yeah, go for it. So, and that's what I love about this regenerative approach to food and our health, and it's a holistic approach. So I wanted to yarn to you in the back of the ear specifically about buffering what's about to happen to us with regards to business model, prices, and I've learned so much already off camera with you just
hopefully I can remember it all now
about all of what was happening and has happened. But I didn't realise that you were a dairy farmer in Victoria.
That's right, born and bred.
Okay, so that was the link obviously between food and farming. And
that's
consumers.
Right. I'm a 63 baby, so back in the heyday of cooperatives, and growing up with all of that, and all the footy clubs and tennis clubs, and just that whole community was really alive, and there was, the cooperatives were a mainstay of the society. But I left home to join the Navy and become an aircraft engineer in '79, and in the 13 years of going away and coming back, what I come back to was something completely different. By this time, demutualisation of cooperatives had happened. Cooperatives had merged to combat the financialisation of the global food system. So they had to get bigger to attract the investment, and eventually farmer shareholdings or farmer membership voting power was starting to be diminished by the investment voting diminishment, no, not the diminishment, their increased participation, I suppose, in decision making, particularly because the sector was attracting ex-corporates to the senior management roles of these rather large co-ops, and it was game over by then, and we eventually saw the corporatisation then of co-ops, and pretty much there's hardly any co-ops left that are really operating in a cooperative sense.
So that's what I couldn't understand, how co-ops stopped being co-ops, although they still called themselves co-ops.
That's right, and we saw that with Murray Goulburn, a couple of years ago. They're not a co-op, but they call themselves a co-op, but they're not, So, Norco are still a co-op, yes.
But they've got shareholders.
But they've got shareholders, but farmer shareholders, and I don't know what the mix is, but it's still playing in a commodity-based system. So whereas when I lost the farm after this, 3 years of drought and prices going down, because I was one of the first dairy farmers in Victoria, a participant in the experimentation around deregulation, which New South Wales, Queensland and Victoria hadn't yet been impacted by. So, but in those last couple of years of running the farm, about 7 of us farmers got together who'd formed the Australian Organic Dairy Farmers Management Group, because it was farmers and managers. And there was about 30 of us, but 7 of us said, let's do something about this. Let's set up our own, little processing facility where we can be down there on the Princess Highway. We can give, tours, we can have calves, a couple of calves. It was going to be very sort of cottage, but it was our way of getting out of the big Bonlac system, which was being bought by a Japanese, they're all being bought at this stage by the big players. Whether it be a big New Zealand company or a big Japanese company, or now big Chinese companies. So we had all sorts of. We were meeting once a week and talking about, well, what's the business model going to look like, and how are we going to separate ourselves using our lived experience of dairy farmers, seeing that last 20 years of the demutualisation and eventually corporatisation of our food system. How are we going to how are we going to design this business model that that doesn't end up there again in 20 or 30 years' time? So there was we got on all sorts of speakers and people to sort of inject ideas into how we might do it, particularly the business model, So anyway, one lady come down from Ballarat and she said, oh, have you heard of this idea called community supported agriculture, CSA? No. And she gave us a half-hour talk about CSAs around the world, in Japan and in Switzerland and in America. And I got a little bit transfixed on this idea. But obviously being a dairy farmer and I was starting to implode mentally because of the issues I was facing around the drought and the falling prices. After I lost the farm, I had all these books stacked up that I went and read. So I disappeared into Tasmania and just read all of these books, whether it be Buckminster Fuller or Walden or just all sorts of books that I had, and particularly a book called Towards a Community Supported Agriculture by Trauger Groff and a fellow by the name of McFadden. And it was like the CSA Bible. They called it the CSA Bible in the States. And it was a melding of 2 philosophers who I had a fair bit, who I liked a bit. The Schumacher Society, Fritz Schumacher, who wrote Small is Beautiful, Economics as if People Mattered, and Rudolf Steiner, who is the founder of the biodynamic movement. Yeah. His Anthroposophical Society. Those 2 societies, which were existing in America, come together and said, we're always in our heads. We're always writing books and reading books and having discussion groups, but we're never putting anything on the ground. Like we've got schools and we've got architects and we've got all sorts of things happening. We've got nothing happening in the agriculture movement, and yet it is the biggest system, known to man, how we get our clothes and nourish ourselves. And they put this idea together, this community-supported agriculture, which was based around true cost pricing, which those Steiner or biodynamic farmers out there would know a lot about, around the threefold social economy, basically divorcing the abstract world of finance and only putting your energies into real things that happen on Earth. In the financialisation of the world system, there's just a bunch of things that aren't real. They're just numbers. They have no basis in reality. And obviously the negative impacts of them are, whether it's bad pollution or health or whatever. And importantly, it was based around a regional food system. So communities being very connected with the people who grew their food. And operated the landscape around them. So then all the downstream impacts, whether it be the creeks, the forests, the biodiversity, was you had to take responsibility as a community. You had to take responsibility of all those sort of things. So over the 7 years after losing the farm and picking myself up and dusting myself up, I had to contextualise that idea in the Australian situation, so where were farmers at, and I come up with this multi-farmer model, because whilst it is great to see these young gung-ho farmers out there growing amazing weekly, CSAs, it's really hard work, and that's what I did. I ran a market garden in Tasmania to try it out, got a whole bunch of people on board with me, rented a 6-acre paddock and grew all this food. But it was really hard work, and I enjoyed it. I was young enough to do it, but I couldn't see a lot of farmers picking that up, and I wanted to put the Food Connect model.
Because it was high labour, high intensity.
High intensity, you had to use a lot of intellect, you had to spend, it's 24/7, you can talk to any of these young farmers around here today, whether it be Neighbourhood Farm or Loop or Millen or Randall and Janita, they are working 24/7. you know, to eke out a living, you know, on this ideal, this romanticised knowledge. Whereas when you have a group of farmers come together and say, well, I'll grow, you know, I might only grow 3 things, but I want to grow eventually 7 types of things. When you have a whole bunch of farmers come together from the whole region, supporting not just the community who are eating that food, and that community supporting them by paying them fairly and doing the marketing, doing all the other bits that farmers are pretty useless at, then you have not only a strong sort of community that's through that business model that's supporting each other in terms of our, you know, intellectual stimulation, but also from a financial and a business point of view. And we're on a quest together, in a way, that hopefully, you know, back in 2004 was a bit of a project. You know, was this going to work in Brisbane? But fortunately, a whole bunch of Brisbane mums really saw this as an amazing opportunity, and they co-founded Food Connect with me, because up until I hadn't launched it, it was just an idea, and I was talking to a group of farmers out at Laidley, but we hadn't launched it. And then one day, by fluke, I got on the radio, and ABC Radio with Steve Austin, and all of a sudden, all these Brisbane mums rang in and said, you know, we want to make that happen, and so they got behind me. I was a bit gun shy. I'd been in business with my farm and as a marine engineer after the aircraft engineering thing, and I didn't want to go back into business again. But over about 6 months of trialling the model, they said, Rob, you know, it's your business, you need to get out in front of it, and we'll support you. So I was still, you know, they pushed me over that extra hurdle of going back into business again and taking all that on, and we're still here. 17, 18 years later. And it hasn't been easy, but it's been rich, and we've really, because our vision has been based on decoupling from fossil fuels, divorcing ourselves from market forces, so nothing to do with the commodity-based food system, nothing to do with banks, nothing to do with any of those financial instruments that are out there, because they're just exploiting you, and they know they're exploiting you, because, you know, you go into a bank manager to borrow money on bended knee, you know. So I wanted nothing to do with that, because I'd done that in the past, and I'd been sucked into that, and that was a big part of the, you know, I wanted to design a solution that was systemically looking at the root cause of a lot of the issues that I and my fellow farmers faced, in a business model that went right past the problems and just put a solution on the ground that hopefully could withstand the looming impacts of climate change and all of the other things that I could see coming down the road, that the industrial world, you know, just seemed to just keep chugging down that, you know, towards that cliff face without a care in the world. And along the way, I had to overcome, you know, my own personal biases around city folk, my own personal biases around hating Coles and Woolies and hating that corporatised world, to where I recognised that they were just a part of a system. Like, no one was really in charge. It was just an economic model of globalisation that was based on nothing really. It really is just a fiction that everyone's just following ad nauseum without any real understanding of the externalisation or the costs in the externalisations. And it's not until, like, what's his name? Nicholas Stern wrote that report in England that said, this is the cost of doing something about climate change now, as opposed to the cost of having to repair it later on. And it was like, the difference is just phenomenal. And when you started to see economists start to challenge the existing worldview, like Kate Rayworth of the donut economy, you start to go, oh wow, okay, so we are on the right track, you know, and now we see the rise of impact investors and catalytic philanthropists who are saying, we're not going to leave our money in perpetuity anymore. We know we've got 10 years left, and we're going to put all of that corpus into systemic solutions. So there's a massive change happening, and obviously now the future is here with the flooding and the fires from a couple of years ago, and the complete malaise of any political will. Is like, it really is up to us, the community. It's up to us, the people And so we're now seeing the rise of the independents, the voices for. It's very exciting, point in time.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
So Food Connect is fitting in quite nicely now. I presume it was a bit of a struggle.
Oh, definitely was a
the
struggle.
old way.
Yeah.
But are you finding
totally.
it easier? And I really want to see you spread.
Yeah. So there's 3 companies at Food Connect. So we've designed the model around the head, heart and the hands. Threefold social economy or anthroposophical economics, where you have a not-for-profit that does all the advocacy and goes out there and finds grants for various things like the new mill we've got and the Indigenous Employment Scheme and a whole bunch of things we do around advancing this idea, this concept, and obviously talking to people. And then we've got so that's the head, that's the bit that does the thinking, what I want to do, what's the vision of this organisation, and how does that translate into the hands of doing things. So hence the shed behind us, I've got 30 odd entrepreneurs there who are all value adding, making whatever it is, whether it's kefirs, kombuchas, sauerkrauts, cheesecakes, all sorts of 30 businesses in the shed. An old farmhouse, funk brewery. We've got the flour mill now that's in the part of the local grain economy. So all those businesses, including Food Connect, are all the hands. They're the doing bit. They're the bits that are actually aggregating the produce, packaging it, value adding it, and then selling it out to the community in a real way. And then you've got the shed, which is owned by 530 of our customers, is the heart of the organisation. So it's the roof over which everyone can operate in this safe space, where the power structures aren't there anymore. So in a normal building, a landlord owns that building. All those tenants, or that tenant, all the other buildings around us are all subject to the power relationship between the landlord and the tenant. You sign a lease, you've got to pay your rent for whatever it is, 5, 6, 10, 20 years. And if something happens and you can't pay your rent, you're out. This is not that. We don't have leases with all the kitchen tenants. We have leases with some of the bigger tenants because they want that lease, obviously, to get their insurance and other things like that. So we've looked at the power relationships. We've looked at, Food Connect has a 2-to-1 wage ratio between the lowest and highest paid. Because when I was with Bonlac as a dairy farmer, here I am getting 18 or 19 cents a litre, and all of us, and the CEO, who's an ex-corporate person, is on $1 million. And all us farmers are like literally committing suicide. Yeah. And you've got and that ex-CEO is now part of one of these carbon offset fintech businesses, which we were talking about earlier. So once again, farmers are being sucked into ag tech, fintech, carbon tech, all of these tunnel vision things that are not dealing with the systemic problem that we have. Plastics, water pollution, flooding, when like not having a diverse farming operation. Still a lot of these regen farmers are monocultures, and they're still exposed. And now they've been sucked into buying it. Now they've been sucked into buying a robot. I think that's cockroaches in the rubbish thing. My daughter's, she's scared of cockroaches.
Insects.
Like as I said in the email to you when you emailed, and I said, I think our time might be finally arriving, and that's how do we make the best of this opportunity, because obviously, we can't replicate what we've done here because each region has different needs. Each region has different people, has a different landscape, has a different map of their assets. And so it's what can we provide where obviously there's some things that you can cherry pick and say yes, that's going to make it really easy for us. But a lot of the work in establishing food sheds or community food centres in regions all over Australia is going to have to be done by a collective of people like we've done up here, saying, well, what can our farmers grow, and getting together, like having farmer workshops where the city folk are in there and they say, the farmers say, this is what we can grow. Righto, farmers, go and have a cup of tea. Righto, city folk, what can you make out of this? What boxes can you design out of this? What products can you make out of it? And then the entrepreneurs come in and they say, well, I'll make trying to think of the, I'm looking at Jessie over there, jams, yeah. jams and chutneys, out of the product that's, at the end of the strawberry season, there's this big flush of overripe strawberries. They can take it all, turn it into all these jams that we can sell later on.
Almost waste to primary.
Oh, totally. It's a closed loop. And it's not just a circular, closed loop system, because we've looked at the financial side of things. We've looked at the ownership side of things. So as I was wanting to say before, we've still got to turn Food Connect into an employee-owned organisation, where all of the employees have an actual stake in the business. Now, whether that's a co-op, because I'm a bit shy of co-ops now, or whether it becomes something, there's some really interesting legal structures out there in England, employee ownership trusts, as opposed to employee share ownership plans, which is in America. And they're very distinct. So once again, going back to our philosophical vision, what is going to be best for us here, and then allowing the best bits of that for people all over, whatever. And there's a lot of people calling us saying, can you come up and talk to us about how we've done what it is? And Food Connect has been an idea that's been based heavily on a huge range of philosophical sort of,
Yeah. But that's the thing, isn't it? So we're looking more probably from co-ops to collaboration.
Yes, yeah, and the design of that business model, that's, like with the shed, 520 people, I looked at the shareholder list last night, 520 people own that building, and they'll get a dividend at some point in time. So obviously a lot of them don't want to participate in decision making around what we do in the shed, because they trust us as the visionaries around, and we've been going for a long time, so they really trust what we're doing in terms of this systems social enterprise idea. But you want to have them participate. So that was one of my theories of change when I started Food Connect, was I don't want people passively getting an organic box at their home. I mean, that's just doing nothing. They're still sitting at home, they're not really participating. So the idea was the city cousin thing. So that was the Brisbane mum said, well, we'll use our houses as collection points, because they'd recognised over the 20 years, much like farming, is that a lot of their neighbours they didn't know. The fence had gone from no fence to a 2-foot picket fence to a 6-foot picket fence with a gap in it to no gap. And they knew no. So they said, well, we've got all these social issues to solve in the city.
Yeah.
Food has, this food distribution system could have a positive impact on reducing that isolation and that feeling of sort of, I'm living in this crowded place where I don't know anyone, I don't trust anyone. So, yeah. So there was, and me being, a dairy farmer in a very sort of, very undiverse part of Western Victoria, I had no concept of social justice issues. So the employees that come to Food Connect, whilst they come from an environmental, Griffith University environmental school, they also had a lot of education for me around social justice issues. So in terms of, I remember when I went down to a coffee farmer, because, no one was doing any value adding. There wasn't any Australian grown garlic at all. When I started Food Connect, there wasn't any software, so we had to design our own software to do this subscription thing, and that's become, now that's the global software system called Open Food Network, OFN, who've just celebrated their 10 years. But I remember going to this merchant banker, ex-merchant banker in Byron Bay, who had this coffee plantation and wanted to sell us. And I come back as proud as punch. Look at this, we're going to have our own coffee, grown down in Byron Bay. It's only 150 k's away, because food miles are important. And Anne Barnes, who was the office manager at the time, she just said, what's to celebrate in that? Like an ex-merchant banker growing coffee beans. Meanwhile, in Timor-Leste and Papua New Guinea and all these places, we've taken away us Westerners have taken away their whole subsistence. She was really pissed off. Wow. She gave me and I was defensive, going, but I've got a 2-hour radius around, and blah, 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 blah. And she said, well, I'm leaving, and, if you don't change your mind, that's just ridiculous, How are you going to address, you talk about systems and all this sort of stuff, but you're not looking at the social justice issues of what we as a Western country have done to all of those third world countries, and we've ruined their subsistence agriculture. We've got them grow cash crops, and now you're going to turn your back on them? I'm going, holy shit, right. So I better have a look at that. Yeah, and I've had many slaps in the face along the way, particularly when we started to engage with the Indigenous people here. That become a profound moment. And I had a lot of respect, because when I lost the farm, what picked me up from crying over that spilt milk was I was in Tasmania, and I'm there really, really lost. And I've gone to the most northern part of Tasmania to camp for the night, to say goodbye. This is the first night I'm in Tasmania. To say goodbye to my farm across the Bass Strait, to say the final goodbye, you know, and I was a mess. Little did I know, I was on a little Aboriginal reserve, and this Aboriginal fella come up through it was in the gloom of the twilight. He come and he said, "Hey mate, you can't camp there." And I went, "All right, where can I camp?" I said, "Oh, sorry mate, I didn't know I was on that." And he said, "That's all right." Anyway, he sat down on a rock beside me, and we had this amazing yarn. And I told him my story. And at the end he said, "Listen, you go down there, it's just off the reserve, camp down there, you'll be fine." In the morning I woke up and I thought, my God, you know, we've done 220 odd years of really bad stuff to these people. Yeah. Here I am, it's only 4 generations, they're, you know, 2,000 generations, yeah. And he's giving me the time. Yeah. And after all we've done to them, here I am having a big sook about, you know, being the 4th generation to lose the farm. I need to pull myself up and think about things a bit differently. And it gave me a good insight into, well, if he gave me why did he give me the time? You know, what work have we got to do together? What have I got to learn more off them? And as it turns out, we're only on the cusp of what we can learn off them in terms of the wisdom, the knowledge, particularly around governance, power, you know, tough love. I think a lot of farmers will relate to Indigenous epistemology because it's not romantic bullshit. It's wisdom won over hard years of relationships, of dealing with relationships, walking onto country, the respect, the cultural practices of asking for permission, you know, of obligation rather than sort of just a whole. I could, you know, yeah. It's amazing, and it's now it's led to the leasing model we have for the shed. You know, about that power relationship. I had no idea that power relationship is completely in the favour of. I mean, you know it. That's the thing about Indigenous epistemology, is you know it, but it's not until you hear another way you go, oh, I'm going to get rid of those leases, and we're going to come up with something else that engenders obligation and unfolding of one's highest and best use, rather than restricting people to, you know, the current norms that the Western civilization has put around us and trapped us in certain ways.
And so that sort of touches on 2 things. One of them is that you were saying there was the 3 different sections of farming. The
business. Oh yeah, the business or the.
Well, so you got the corporate, the ones in the.
Oh yes. Oh, that's right. Yeah. Going to that. Yeah. So 2004, there wasn't much happening for small farmers to connect directly, and so we were used as a bit of a conduit for farmers to get their confidence up, to meet a few, you know, people from the city, restaurateurs, cafe owners, shop owners, and then over 2 or 3 years, this is only about 5% of the farmers that come through us. They've now got their own, you know, businesses, and they're completely relating to them. We gave away a lot of our customers in Stanthorpe, Warwick, Kingaroy to farmers who wanted to set up their own CSA systems. So that was a part of us building the resilience of the region, because.
So rather than holding on to.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And this is a threefold social economy, is where the vision for the greater region has to be shared with everyone else, and big being big is a systemic problem. Yeah, because eyes per acre. You know, a small to medium-sized farm, they can manage their land because they can see it, they can visualise it, whereas a large farm, you've got no idea. Obviously, with cameras and things like that nowadays, they can see a lot more of their farm, but there's nothing replaces being there, hearing the breeze, listening to the animals, the birds. All of those things are really important too.
Because they're more than the 4 seasons.
There's about, well, depending on what country you're on, there's 7 seasons in some there's only 3 seasons. But there's, you know, when you look at the whole system that farmers are taking responsibility, all the life in the ground, to because we do have on the small water cycle. If you in regenerative agriculture, there's a large water cycle that is being driven by the big ocean currents and the dipole and all those sort of things. But we actually can control the small water cycles with planting more trees, with having biodiversity, with even by having polycultural farming, you're really influencing the biodiversity that comes to that farm, that protects that farm from pests and predators. You have balance. Whereas if you're a monoculture organic farmer, you need those organically certified pesticides and herbicides to keep the farm functioning. And that's why I was going to the earlier point. The farmers have the capacity, because we're dealing with a lot of things already, to expand our intellectual knowledge to thinking about these root cause systemic issues, and thinking about the customer, and thinking about the health system, and thinking about the water pollution or the plastics we use, all those things, because because we can. When I talk to city folk, they've sort of compartmentalised into various jobs and occupations. It's really a lot harder for them to contextualise all these other issues and then build them into their business model. And that's where I say farmers, we've got so much opportunity working with customers through these larger sort of scaled up aggregation, distribution, marketing and community facilities. Like we have a lot of events here that educate people. So the farmers come here and they'll talk at night, people come visit their farmer and get to know what's going on the farm. And that shared learning, shared understanding of, oh, that's happening for you out of the farm. Oh, I need to take a bit more responsibility and maybe look after you a lot more, like the tenants here. The investors, I told all the investors we had a big shindig when we raised the $2.5 million to buy the shed. And the investors come along, and obviously a lot of them are customers. Well, the majority of them are customers, 82% are women. And I said, your responsibility is to support those tenants. Because if you don't support those tenants and buy their product and provide feedback to their product and maybe help them out from time to time, because you've got skills, whether it's marketing skills, accounting skills, whatever, if you don't support them, they're not going to pay their rent and you're not going to get a return. So you're last on the list. So first on the list is all the tenants and all the employees. Second on the list is the community, the eaters, the people, the customers who buy, and you're a part of that. But then down. But as an investor, we build a strong foundation for this business. In 4, 5, 6 years, when it's really solid, you'll get your returns then. We're not going to give you returns any earlier. And this is the financialisation of the world. People wanting, returns straight away. It's a ridiculous notion. You've got to give, particularly in a business that is dealing with these systemic issues that we're now front and centre of, and these businesses, as I was saying, with urea prices and all the other things, fuel prices, all those sort of things, us as a business, because we're based on a regional model, we've got electric vans, a whole bunch of solar on the building, we're much more insulated against those sort of against those pricing influences that are going to impact the rest of the world. And because we've built the business around being resilient around climate change and long relationships with farmers, we're sort of much more buffered in many ways.
So basically, the farm gate prices are protected.
Yep. Yeah.
Customer prices are protected.
Yep.
You guys are protected because you're a community, fully functioning, like almost ecosystem.
Yeah. It's a very complex. It's not easy to manage, but that's part of the joy of the work, I suppose, is dealing with those sort of that complexity. I mean, Emma and I we're down in Adelaide next week for a social enterprise complexity systems day, at a university down there. So we're now starting to see the wicked problems of the world now being, or they've been researched probably the last, as science has moved away from acknowledged that yes, reductionist science has created silos and not a lot of interlinked thinking or thinking about the interrelationships between all of those things. Now we're seeing system science come to the fore, and social enterprises looking, or businesses like us, and other systems thinking businesses now being seen as part of the bigger solution, and impact investors and catalytic philanthropists are now looking at us and going, wow, you are the solution. And you're based on the ground, it's real, it's not 15, 20, 25% ridiculous returns that these fintech and all these other tech industries are basing their business models on to pay another CEO another $1 million. Just perpetuates poverty, perpetuates the problem we're in. So you've got to have a business model that is based in the ground, that doesn't, that has a mission lock, has an asset lock, because, as we're seeing in the food businesses get their businesses up to a certain, and then they get bought out, and then the vision goes, and they become a part of the global problem. Yeah. So we have to put into our constitution protections that protect the community from those businesses being sold or those businesses losing the mission. Even you can sell them, but you have to have a mission lock in there that protects the values of the business, so it's not lost to the community.
Yeah, good idea.
And then, our vision is, 100,000, 200,000 small food-based social enterprises and fibre. We've got a couple of fibre businesses up there, closed loop with Full Circle Fibres up there. We're now expanding into the fibre side of things because obviously food is a much easier thing for people to realise, oh God, I don't want to eat that because it's got this and this and this and this, whereas putting the clothing on your back is a different thing. So this is all Queensland cotton. It's $70 a shirt wholesale. Yeah, but this shirt will last 10, 15 years as opposed to the crap that people buy. So it's it's giving people the idea that what they're buying and putting in their body is going to give them long-term health outcomes. And this sort of stuff here, economically, like buying in bulk, buying good product in bulk, you save a lot of money. Becoming a part of a buyers club, you save a lot of money. So we have a lot of buyers clubs who buy off Food Connect. It's very empowering. It's very empowering for them because they get to create their own food system. They can engage with their local baker, their local butcher. It's not about buying everything from Food Connect and from our tenants because they might be based down the Gold Coast. You buy off us for a while, get to know us, get to use our model, but then engage with your butcher, engage with your local farmer and do the same thing down there. And so they become very empowered about, oh my God, yeah, I can do what Food Connect has done because he's just a dairy farmer. So if he can do it, anyone can do it. So that's the sort of...
So on that, if you are a farmer and you are stuck in that commodity system and you want to get out, or you just go, look, this regenerative farming is just too hard, I just don't see a way out.
Yeah.
What would you advise them?
Yeah, so you've got to really surround yourself in a community of farmers if you're moving in that direction. And so often I see farmers who say, I tried that many, many years ago and it failed, And that was probably because there wasn't as much information or support around. Now there is. There's a lot of regenerative farming groups, whether it be RCS or the Holistic Farming Management Group, or there's just so many now, with David Hardwick, and all the courses and all the education now. Find a community, be a part of that community, and empty your mind and be open to becoming more intellectually stimulated around what you can do on your farm, and you will grow younger by being engaged in that system. And then if you're a commodity-based farmer, then look at, and it's starting to happen now. We're seeing those small micro businesses that might have been doing barley malts or whatever now becoming large, serious, multi-million-dollar value-adding enterprises. Engage with them. Say, how can I sell my organic oats or my regenerative oats into your system or whatever it is, and together, and be a part of this national community that is strategically saying, what can I do with you? We've already got with on the advisory board of the Sustainable Table Fund, and we had 180 applications for funding. We funded 10. 5 of them are Indigenous businesses. 3 of them are grain-based businesses. Farmers are really looking at how can I get together with a group of farmers and engage with an impact investor or a philanthropist and say, I need whatever it is, $500,000 in impact capital to start this business up. We've got the business model, we've got the farmers, and we're going to value add and we're going to sell, into Melbourne, because people in the city are demanding these local products. They want healthy, nutritious products, made regionally, sourced regionally. They don't have to go to China and back again to be blended or whatever else. And looking at flour, which is the most ubiquitous substance in Australia, it's all roller milled. The bran and the germ, the healthy bits are all taken out of it, and people are eating shit, and they know they're eating shit. So there's massive opportunities because the appetite at the eater's end of it is crying out for a whole product, that isn't processed. or that minimal processing, and
So how do they find a philanthropist then? Is there like a group?
Yeah, there's quite a few now. The Impact Investment Summit was just last weekend, and it was the first one I missed. There's a big language barrier to get over, but I'm sure farmers are up to the challenge of figuring it out. But I did. It took me 2 years. Emma was saying, "Why are you going to this thing?" I said, "I've got to understand the language." Yeah. I'd come back with all these acronyms, and you go and have a beer with them, and you'd sit down with your list of acronyms. What does that mean? Oh, that means blah blah blah. That means blah blah blah. And by you being quite interested, humble, naive, they start, because that authenticity, yes. You get it. They become attracted to you because they go, oh. Because in the financial world, everyone is pretending to be something they're not. Okay. Yeah, and so when a person walks in authentically saying, oh, I want to solve this problem, or I want to do this, or I want to do that, and I've got no idea, I need the money, but I don't want to go near the banks, and I don't want to go near a venture capitalist, and I don't want to go, they know what they don't want, but I want to do this, people will lean in on that and say, well, I might have, $2 million, but I've got 100,000, but I know someone who has got 2 million. Or there's the Impact Investment Club. There's the 100% Impact Club. They're the ones who are investing 100% of their corpus into impact businesses. Then you've got all sorts of...
Sorry, are these all Australian?
These are all Australian. I mean, it's a global phenomenon now, yeah. Right. There's a little book called Impact, a little red book by Sir Ronald something or other. It's $5 to buy this book. Every farmer should buy the book and go, oh my God, the finance industry is flipping on its head right at the moment. There is money awash everywhere, and because obviously the financialisation of agriculture and food created the divestment and energy and other things, the divestment movement, but there was no solution. There was no one saying, but once you divested all your money, where do you invest it in? Now that's happened. So now there's investors saying, I know what I want to invest it in. I want to invest it in impact businesses, social enterprises that are doing something about whether it's an environmental problem or a social problem or whatever it is. And so farmers fit into that bucket. Every single farmer fits into that bucket. They just need to reframe their business and say, yeah, I'm looking after the land and I want to protect that wetland down there. But it's productive at the moment, so I need somehow to think about who's going to help me invest in restoring that wetland, because as we know in regenerative agriculture, once you restore that wetland, the whole farm gets better, the biodiversity, but you need that catalytic capital to give you to allow you to do that, whether it's through a grant or we're seeing all sorts of blended finance now, which is where you have philanthropy and maybe a no interest loan, and then maybe some venture capital 5 years down the track, from the same person. Yeah, or from a group of people. So like here, 7 of our investors are sophisticated impact investors, and out of the 7, 5 are women, and they got together. Unbeknownst to me, I was ringing a few of them saying, and they were behind the scenes, talking to each other, saying we need to invest in this. Let's get on board. And they put up, over $700,000. Yeah, and it was and they don't want to be on the board. They trust us to do what we've been doing for many, many years. That's the sort of attitude that's out there in the impact investment community. It's much more aligned to real businesses that are attacking and addressing these systemic. So, they've moved away from charities because charities haven't done anything. I mean, they've done great things and they've done noble things, but nothing's really changed. Yeah. They're now saying, oh God, I want to put my money into where I can see change happening. I see impact, measurable impact.
The repetitive question I get is, well, what are you doing? Like, not me personally, but what are people doing? What can we do? Who's being active? So one of the reasons for being in the back of the ute was to show the audience that
what's going on.
There are so many people, just little people, being really proactive.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm going to look into that investment because.
I've got some great relationships with impact investors who used to be in the conventional finance world, but they're absolutely it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful, and it really is worth investing the time and space to go to some of those conferences in the city, just to sit there and have a beer and listen to what they're saying, because you'll be astounded of what they're saying. Like, they can see these problems, particularly with the change of wealth at the moment. So it's gone from the money, it's gone from the people who made all their money out of fossil fuels to the next generation who are very aware of climate change and are saying, right, I've got all this money now. Well, look at George. Look at Bezos' wife. She, in the last 6 months, dropped $8.4 billion to a whole bunch of charities, about 170 charities, or more, might even be more than that, 700, no, maybe 700 charities, $1 million or more, that had never, that struggled to get grant making. In 6 months, she put more money in philanthropy into not-for-profits that are doing real work in community than the whole philanthropic community, including Gates, has done over his lifetime. Right. It's incredible what these young philanthropists are doing. And the same here, we've got them here. Hayley Morris, who's the head of the Sustainable Table. Her father made all the money. She's now the fund manager and runs the operations, and she's saying no. And she's engaging with bringing all these other investors into it and saying, be a part of this. It's really exciting. Yeah, it's very, very exciting. Yeah, it's really well worth. And so now, from a systems point of view, the hardest work is in that aggregation, distribution, value-adding, marketing. That's the bit that's missing. And farmers, that's where, farmers are saying, I'm doing all this fantastic work on the farm, but I'm not getting the price, or I'm still in a commodity-based market, or I'm in a market that is still wanting me to grow, X amount of quality. So that's the other thing about Food Connect. We know that seasons, you're going to have a tough season. A lot of farmers got wet last year. Their grain got wet. We can still do, we can still turn that into flour. Bakers can still use it. But in the commodity-based system, it's rubbish. It's turned into feedstock or whatever else it is. And so you're continually exposed to other decisions made. Whereas if we can focus our attention to, we can replace that infrastructure scaled, so it's not micro anymore. It's a whole bunch of businesses where we're seeing the full cycle. There's so many things you can do with all of that waste product and value add it and then sell it back out again. But it has to be regional. You can still get stuff from other parts of Australia, but once we have 200 or 300 of those highly networked food sheds, food hubs, community food centres, they're all networked, so they'll be all trading between each other. So then you'll have more resilience added to the system, and then you'll see prices will actually come down. So we'll be a local or a regional food system will be much more affordable than the commodity-based system that's being exposed to everything, because you won't have those costs. From a percentage point of view, in terms of percentage of sales, it's much lower than the conventional industry. But we still have to, we're still in a part of that system. But once that system becomes, even 25% regional, we only have to get to...
Collapse the old system?
Oh, it already is collapsing. Yeah, it's just collapsing behind closed doors. Yeah. And they're scurrying like buggery, which is why we're seeing all of these ex-corporates moving into fintech, agtech, carbon trading tech, all these other things. Because obviously that's the way that system works, is what's the next new thing that's going to make a lot of money that I can get in on, totally ignoring the global problems, because they're just short-term thinking, Yeah, and they might have a mortgage on their fifth house that they've got to support, and so they move into that, and so we've got to be aware of what's driving these issues. And then look above that and go, actually, food and agriculture is really well, as I was saying before, did I say that? The four things, the opportunity? Yeah.
Yeah, but
not on camera. Yeah. So it's not spoken about at all, and it's so important to get across, because you've got the four big systems. What turns the lights on and runs everything, the energy side of things, the A to B, getting A to B, the utes and the trucks and the trains and the transport, and then the built environment, so all the buildings, houses, everything that we rely upon. That gives us shelter for the night. Those three systems are decoupling from fossil fuels, particularly the energy sector. It's well and truly the old industry's gone. So the coal, fossil fuel-based industries no one's going to invest in them whatsoever. So it gives you a signal. Right. So those three systems are moving away from fossil fuels, but all of them not only emit more in the transition, but pollute more in the transition. Whereas food and agriculture, fibre, are sitting out there, not only will they emit less as they transition across to becoming more regenerative and more polyculture and more regional, but they are the solution to these systemic issues out there, whether it be water pollution, plastics in pollution, whether it be fuel, because we've divorced ourselves from fossil fuels, and we've collaborated. And that's probably the final frontier for humanity, is to collaborate. And when you get that, and collaboration is hard, because you've got to drop, your superiority complex about I'm a white male, privileged, and I've ran the farm all this years this way. You've got to allow the kids, and particularly for females who are coming into the ag scene, allow them to run the show. And then the next thing is to allow the Indigenous people to come in and give you the wisdom and the knowledge and the epistemology and the terms of reference to think differently about, your highest and best use on the planet, which is totally not what a lot of farmers aren't thinking about. There's just so much opportunity for the food, fibre and agriculture sector that hasn't been realised, and yet the other four biggies just aren't going to do it for us. And yet we have got carbon tunnel vision at the moment. They're focused on the energy sector and saying if we electrify everything, the world will be fine. No, it won't be, because it's ignoring a whole bunch of other issues. It's up to us, farmers. Yeah.
Thank you.
And ex-farmers.
Well, it's in your blood though, isn't it? So.
It is, very much so, yes. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
No, pleasure.
Wow, I didn't realise it was going to be this big. But I knew it was going to be big because business is so important.
Yeah, totally.
No matter what system you're in, no matter who you are, whatever industry, it's if you and this holistic approach is what's going to get us out of where we are. Yeah,
no, absolutely. The business models we deploy today are critical to how we solve some of these wicked problems that we call out there. Yeah. So and we've got the World Social Enterprise Forum here this year in Brisbane. Yeah. In Brisbane at the Entertainment Centre.
But when?
In October or November. Yeah.
So how do you find out about all these things?
There's so much going on. What I'll do is a part of the replication thing is a lot of people say, "What do you read? How do you know about this stuff? How do you, where did you get that money from? How did you raise the equity crowdfunding? How did you do that? Like without a bank, you raised $2.5 million without a bank. Yeah. Bloody hell, that's incredible. So we are putting together a sort of like a couple of one pages, because eventually we'll put the whole thing together and it'll be put out there as a sort of framework, systems framework for thinking about how do you do food sheds, but also all the other things. Where do you go to just to read up on social enterprise, to read up on impact investing? So that'll we'll be putting all that together over the next 6 months. We've got a couple of investors who are philanthropists, because they know that I'm still busy on the ground doing things, and they need to extract me out of that and give people, there's a Tesla. Look at that. We've seen so many Teslas getting around the place. It's so exciting. One of our tenants bought a Tesla. Talk about, here we are, Emma and I are struggling, to earn every cent we have, and then one of our tenants goes and buys a Tesla. Yeah, but they gave us a couple of drives in it.
The problem with electric cars is you're plugging them into the system.
Oh, well, we're on solar here. So that electric van over there, it totally, pretty much, I think...
Oh, you plugged in?
Yeah, and we've got 4 batteries. Yeah, we've got solar panels on this. We've got 4 batteries, so we raised that through a grant. The 4 batteries will keep the cold rooms and the freezers and everything going here till about 10 or 11 o'clock at night.
Okay. And
then the rest is just off the grid.
Oh,
yeah. So the economic sense, the ROI on another 4 or 5 batteries, and the technology around batteries. So there's some new technology coming in. We'll eventually 80 or 90%, decoupled from the grid. Yeah. But our grid energy comes from green, comes from Innova, which is community-owned energy down in Byron Bay.
Innova,
yeah. So we're a part of Innova. So yeah. They launched actually the whole thing up here.
Yes, that's right. I did see that.
Yeah. So no, we're really good friends. Actually, we equity crowdfunded parallel with them for the shed as they did for their. So it was very exciting. And so all of these, like the community-owned pubs down in parts of Victoria and the community-owned, there's a lot of community ownership models out there that aren't based on the cooperative model. They're based on something much more innovative and around social enterprise thinking. And importantly, which is where the cooperatives really died in the bum, was they were for their members, and their members were either dairy farmers or, that was just the members were the farmers.
Yes.
In our model, everyone's a member. The eaters are a member, the tenants are a member, the farmers are a member. So it's really important that you don't, just say, because they're the ones who buy your product.
Yeah.
You can't ignore them. You've got to bring them into participating in this business model. And that's what Emma's, when I go out and attract a few investors, she interrogates them. Like, she doesn't want their money if they're aligned. And she did. When we had 4 investors who wanted to buy the shed, put up $4 million. And Emma said, what's the difference between 1 white guy and 4 white guys from Melbourne? Get out of here. Yeah, so then we went, okay. Plan B? What's plan B? Get the community to raise it. Like turning your back on that for good reasons and saying, sorry, but no, we don't want to take your $4 million. We like you, but this is our vision. That from a relationship point of view, it's not like you're saying piss off, because you're 4 white guys, is, no, this is our vision. Yeah, and they respect you because you're sticking to your vision, your mission, your principles.
And they might even change a bit.
So that's the ripple effect of all of this.
Yeah.
Totally. A farmer leaning on the fence saying, I sell, to Food Connect, or, I now sell into a couple of restaurants, and, how much are you getting? I'm getting, really? Well, I'm going to talk to my buddy,
Yeah.
And so that ripple effect and shining this light into dark places in the system, the commodity-based system, is where you get people going, oh God, now I've got to go and do this. And Emma, she watches Coles and Woolies and their language and their marketing, and roughly it takes about 3 or 4 years after we've done something for them to adopt the model. So now we're seeing, obviously, all the things we were doing in 2004, into the DNA of the business model was all of this thinking around circular economy, which wasn't invented, social enterprise, which wasn't invented, community. Like, we actually started Food Connect by selling 4 weeks in advance. So we crowdfunded the business from the start. Well, it was just part of the business model that I said, well, I've got to find enough customers who are committed to buying produce off these farmers, and the best way of them demonstrating their commitment is to buy in advance.
Yeah.
Untested, unproven. Yeah. And so that's, so that was crowdfunding. And obviously all the things around food waste and all the standards around a carrot being this orange and this taper and this bloody blah, 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 blah. We threw all that out the window back in 2004 and said, no, if it's healthy, why can't you eat it? Nothing wrong with it. Yeah. So that's come to pass. And now we're sitting in an entirely different space, which is where I was leading to those farmers missing in the middle. What can we do for them? So that's a new and probably a far bigger impact model than we've been doing up till now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the next stage.
Next stage.
Thanks.
No worries at all. Cheers, Tamsin.
Good work.
I don't know how you're going to edit that.